House property, and its management *****. Transcriber's note. New original cover, art included with this ebook is granted to the public domain. House property and its management. Some papers on the methods of management introduced by Miss Octavia Hill and adapted to modern conditions. Logo London, George Allen and Unwin Limited, Ruskin House, 40, Museum Street, WC1. First published in 1921, all rights reserved. Introduction by I. G. Gibbon, D.Sc., CBE, Ministry of Health. Of standards we have heard much in connection with new housing, and, quite naturally, nearly always of material standards, of the number of houses to the acre, the size and the number of rooms, the provision of baths and the like, but of personal standards little, although persons of experience know full well that, where there are difficulties, half the trouble, at a moderate estimate, could be removed by personal action. The experiment of the ownership and management of large numbers of houses by local authorities is not free from the hazards of democratic control. Some in full sympathy with the experiment view it not without some misgivings. And the misgivings will not be without place if adequate measures are not taken for proper management. It is timely, therefore, that we should be reminded of the most instructive experiment made during the last century in the management of house property, the work of Octavia Hill. Her experiment in house management would probably have by now won her many more practical followers had she been less of a social worker. But had she been less of a social worker she would never have made the experiment. There may still be a few of the comparatively small number of persons who know of her work, who look upon it as an attempt to insinuate a district visitor under the disguise of a rent collector. District visitors doubtless have their place and season, but the aim of those who would follow in the footsteps of Octavia Hill, the women property managers, is to manage property on a firm business basis, to make it pay, and they have shown that they can make it pay, more so in difficult circumstances than business management of a dull routine kind, and to carry out the work with knowledge and experience, with sympathy and tact, and with as reasonable a regard to the genuine interests of the tenants as of the owner. This is their aim, and, where person and place fit, their achievement. Octavia Hill's influence was great in this country, but it passed beyond its borders. One of the most interesting reports issued in recent years on the management of house property has been that of the Octavia Hill Association, at Philadelphia, who report the uniform success of management on the lines laid down by Octavia Hill. 1. In Holland, also, her influence has been great. And at Amsterdam, for instance, all municipal house property, which is extensive, is managed by women who have been trained in her methods. 1. See Good Housing That Pays, by Fullerton L. Waldo. Philadelphia, The Harper Press, 1012-20, Chancellor Street. 1917. The ideal in these matters, I think, is self-management, where the tenants in a group of houses manage their own affairs with a social regard to their own real interests. An almost impossible result at the present time unless the tenants have a substantial financial stake in the property. We are very far indeed from this solution as yet, though every effort is needed towards achieving it, and one disappointing result of the state-assisted scheme of houses is the very poor showing made by public utility societies. But a large measure of self-management is not precluded from the scheme of management on Octavia Hill's lines, as, indeed, has been demonstrated in practice. There should be no spirit of patronage in management, if, as happens, the tenant comes to look upon the property manager as a counselor and friend. This should grow out of the business management and as an incident to it. Octavia Hill and her successors did not work simply by the light of nature, or believe that women, as such, had a God-given aptitude for this business, though, house management being primarily a matter for the wife and mother, it naturally opens a field for which women should be well fitted. But the same need of instruction arises whether the management be by men or by women. The pupil has to be put through a severe course of training. She has to be versed in the most important facts of the law as to rents, landlord and tenant, and sanitation. She has to be acquainted with the defects which occur in houses, and how most economically to remedy them. Above all, she has to acquire that measure of firmness, tact and sympathy without which success is not likely to be attained. A pupil who is likely to be fully successful must have a goodly measure of that personal aptitude which, though difficult to test by any system of examination, is as vitally necessary as are the essential technical qualifications. If the manager of house property is to give of her best, she must be trusted with ample responsibility and authority. If hampered by restrictions, if limited in authority, if not granted powers for selecting and dealing with tenants and the control of repairs, if she has to refer to superior authority, whether an employer, or an official or a committee, before action can be taken, there is not much hope, even under favorable conditions, of more than a bare success. Here lies one principal danger, equally of autocracy or democracy. It is not good business or sound sense to pay a person for duties and to relieve her of the real responsibility attached to them, including the risk of dismissal for failure. In dealing with slum property, the lessons of Octavia Hill's work are exceedingly encouraging. Weary years must pass before there can be extensive demolition and rebuilding of slum areas. Are we therefore to lie resigned and allow these grievous sores to fester in our cities and towns? In properly qualified management, we have one at least of the keys to a temporary, if not a permanent, solution of the problem, and in this way we may effectively deal with the real evil. The ordinary method of clearance and rebuilding has often resulted too much in the shifting of the evil to another quarter, though it may be, happily, in a less concentrated form. One incidental gleam from the reading of the papers in this volume is of the great advances which have really been made in housing conditions. We are apt at times, not without reason, to gird at the slowness with which the manifest evils around us are being removed, but it is well occasionally, for a proper sense of proportion and for reform itself, to be reminded of the great improvements which have been achieved. It is important to bear in mind that the principles of trained management apply as much to privately owned as to public property. If the owners of properties in areas which are now classed as slums would but join together and employ for the common management of their property persons trained and with aptitude for the work, it is no exaggeration to say that within a few years a great transformation would be effected in the slum problem of London and of other towns. A transformation which would not only ease the manifold burdens of public authorities, but would be less irksome to the owners of the property and of untold benefit to its occupiers. Equally important is it to remember that the methods of management associated with Octavia Hill are as pertinent for new property as for old, indeed, in some ways more so, for prevention is better than cure. She learnt her secrets in dealing with bad property, just as the scientist wrests his secrets from the pathological management of house property on the general lines laid down by her, adapted and developed, and, as I believe, with increasing emphasis on cooperative self-management, will help materially not only in the minor achievement of preventing property from degenerating into slums, and this, as experience shows, may well happen even with good and well-planned property, but in the greater achievement of attaining that higher standard of contentment, and of pride of home and locality which should be the aim of all those who have the interests of the country at heart. The following are some papers written by Miss Octavia Hill in connection with her housing work. They are republished in the hope that her methods may be widely adopted in the efforts that are now being made to improve the very defective housing conditions in our cities. M. Jeffrey. Edith Neville. Contents page Introduction. By I. G. Gibbon, D.Sc., CBE, Ministry of Health. 5 selections from Octavia Hill's writings. I. Management of Houses for the Poor. 15-2. Cottage Property in London. 23. Blank Court. 31-4. The Influence of Model Dwellings upon Character. 39 v. Small Houses in London. 56. Letters to Fellow Workers. 52. Other Papers. 7. Women Managers, A Crown Estate. 72-8. Management of Municipal Houses in Amsterdam. 78-9. Report on House Property Management by a Subcommittee of the Women's Section of the Garden Cities and Town Planning Association. 83. House Property and its Management. I. Management of Houses for the Poor. 1899, 34 years ago, when I first began to manage houses inhabited by working people, London was in a very different state from what it is now, and it is useful and interesting to review the changes, their effects, and their bearing on the special work we are considering today. 1. The standard of comfort was far lower then than now. In Marylebone, where I began work, nearly every family rented but one room. Now there are hundreds of 2- and 3-room tenements. There were no cooking ranges in the rooms, water was hardly ever carried up higher than the parlors. There were hardly any amusements open to the people, there was no underground railway, no trams, few cheap omnibuses, there were no free libraries, no Education Act, no board schools. Wages were very decidedly lower, hours of work were longer. The bright oil lamps did not exist. Food was not so cheap or so various. Flowers were never sold in the streets to the poor. The people stood in those days far more in need of cheer and of help. 2. The knowledge of sanitary matters had penetrated hardly at all, gross ignorance prevailed. There were, moreover, few, if any, convalescent homes, no country holiday arrangements. The Building Acts took cognizance of very few of the requirements for health, and hardly any sanitary measures were enforceable, fewer were enforced. Few hospitals for infectious diseases existed. Many excellent appliances for drainage were not invented. 3. There was not 1/10 part of the sympathy and interest in the welfare of the people which permeates all classes now. From these and many other causes a London court in 1864 was a far more degraded and desolate place than it can be now, even in the remotest and forlornest region. And in taking charge of it one had to do a variety of things oneself, where now one finds the intelligent and willing cooperation of many other agencies. Again, there were next to no model dwellings and little power of cheap locomotion, so that a court in those days was subject to little change of population, the same families clung to it, lived, married and died in it. Cheap locomotion and facilities in reading have brought the different parts of London into much closer communication. Many of these facts made the necessity for preserving and regulating the old courts and houses far more important than is the case now. The old courts are rapidly disappearing, and numerous blocks of buildings with modern appliances are now scattered over most neighborhoods. But in 1864 tenants were neither routed out of foul and close courts, nor would they have been received into the rare and select model dwellings. Moreover, in the rough courts they were little meddled with, and could pursue in ignorance their insanitary habits further than would be possible now. It was very natural, therefore, that my first efforts should have been directed to rough courts and the inhabitants as I found them there. 6 letters to fellow workers. In 1872 Miss Octavia Hill began the practice of writing at the end of each year a letter which was sent to all who were associated with her in her work. The following are some selections. Work under the Ecclesiastical Commissioners. Letter of 1902. During the past year the Ecclesiastical Commissioners asked us to take charge of some of their property, of which the leases fell in Southwark and Lambeth. In Southwark the area had been leased long ago on the old-fashioned tenure of lives. That is, it was held not for a specified term of years, but subject to the life of certain persons. The lease fell in, therefore, quite suddenly, and 50 of the houses, which were occupied by working people, were placed under my care. I had only 4 days' notice before I had to begin collecting. It was well for us that my fellow workers rose to the occasion and at once undertook the added duties, well, too, that we were then pretty strong in workers. It was a curious Monday's work. The houses having been let and sublet, I could be furnished with few particulars. I had a map and the numbers of the houses, which were scattered in various streets over the 5 acres, which had reverted to the commissioners, but I had no tenant's name nor the rental of any tenement, nor did the tenants know or recognize the written authority, having long paid to other landlords. I subdivided the area geographically between my 2 principal South London workers, and I went to every house, accompanied by one or other of them. I learnt the name of the tenant, explained the circumstances, saw their books and learnt their rental, and finally succeeded in obtaining every rent. Many of the houses required much attention, and since then we have been busily employed in supervising necessary repairs. The late lessees were liable for dilapidations, and I felt once more how valuable to us it was to represent owners like the commissioners, For all this legal and surveying work was done ably by responsible and qualified men of business, while we were free to go in and out among the tenants, watch details, report grievous defects, decide what repairs essential to health should be done instantly. We have not half done all this, but we are steadily progressing. The very same day the commissioners sent to me about this sudden accession of work in Southwark, they asked me whether I could also take over 160 houses in Lambeth. I had known that this lease was falling into them, and I knew that they proposed rebuilding for working people on some 7 acres there, and would consult me about this. But I had no idea that they meant to ask me to take charge of the old cottages pending the rebuilding. However, we were able to undertake this, and it will be a very great advantage to us to get to know the tenants, the locality, the workers in the neighborhood, before the great decisions about rebuilding are made. In this case I had the advantage of going round with the late lessee, who gave me names, rentals and particulars, and whose relations with his late tenants struck me as very satisfactory and human. On this area our main duties have been to induce tenants to pay who knew that their houses were coming down. In this we have succeeded, to decide those difficult questions of what to repair in houses soon to be destroyed, to empty one portion of the area where cottages are first to be built, providing accommodation elsewhere so far as is possible, and to arrange the somewhat complicated minute details as to rates and taxes payable for cottages partly empty, temporarily empty, on assessments, which had all to be ascertained, and where certain rates in certain houses for certain times only were payable by the owners whom we represent. Letter of 1903. The past year has brought one very large expansion of our work, larger than that of any previous year, and it is started on independent lines, in a way which gives hope for future growth. The ecclesiastical commissioners wrote to tell me in the autumn that an area in South London containing 22 acres, and with between 500 and 600 houses on it, was falling into them at the expiration of a long lease, and they asked me to undertake the management of the property. Bearing in mind what they themselves had said as to providing for the continuity of such work, and with a deep desire not to lose near touch with my own old tenants, workers and places, if I spread my time over still larger areas, I set myself to think whether this new work might not be started from a new centre, and have been fortunate enough to be able to recommend a lady of great power and experience, who consents to undertake this new property, with direct responsibility to the commissioners. It was a huge undertaking, and needed much care and labour to start it well, and naturally we were all keen to help. It was a great day when we took over the place. Our seconds in command took command manfully for a fortnight of all our old courts, and 14 of us met on Monday, October 5th, to take over the estate and collect from 500 to 600 tenants wholly unknown to us. We organized it all thoughtfully. We had 15 collecting books and all the tenants' books prepared, opened a bank account, found a room as an office, and divided the area among the workers. Our first duty was to get the tenants to recognize our authority and pay us. I think we were very successful. We got every tenant on the estate to pay us without any legal process, except one who was a regular scamp. We collected some £250, most of it in silver, and got it safely to the bank. Then came the question of repairs. There were written in the first few weeks 1,000 orders for these, although, as the whole area is to be rebuilt, we were only doing actually urgent and no substantial ones. All these had to be overlooked and reported on and paid for. Next came pouring in the claims for borough and water rates. We had to ascertain the assessments of every house, the facts as to whether landlord or tenant was responsible, whether the rates were compounded for or not, what allowance was to be claimed for empty houses or rooms. There were 2 water companies supplying the area, and we had to learn which supplied each house. The whole place was to be rebuilt, and even the streets rearranged and widened, and I had promised the commissioners I would advise them as to the future plans. These had to be prepared at the earliest date possible, the more so as the sanitary authorities were pressing, and sent in 100 orders in the first few days we were there. It is needless to say with what speed, capacity and zeal the representatives of the commissioners carried on their part of these preparations, and they rapidly decided on which streets should be first rebuilt. But this only implied more to be done, for we had to empty the streets swiftly, and that meant patching up all possible empty houses in other streets and moving the tenants into them. Fortunately, there were several houses empty, the falling in of the leases having scared some people away. The commissioners had decided to close all the public houses on the estate, and we let one to a girls' club, and had to put repairs in hand to fit it for its changed destination. The matter now stands thus: we have got through the first quarter, have collected £2,672, mostly in silver, the quarter's accounts are nearly ready to send in, we have completed the most pressing repairs, have emptied 2 streets, and plans for rebuilding them are decided on, tenders have been accepted for these, and they have been begun. Plans have been prepared for rebuilding and rearrangement of the whole estate, and these are now before the commissioners for their consideration. They provide a site for rebuilding the parish school, an area of about an acre, as a public recreation ground, the substitution of 4 wide for 3 narrow streets, and afford accommodation for 790 families in 4-roomed and 6-roomed cottages, cottage flats, and flats of 3- and 2-room tenements in houses in no case higher than 3 stories. But there remains one most important point still under the consideration of the commissioners. It is whether this domain is to be leased to builders and managed by them and their successors for some 80 years, or whether it is to remain under the direct control of the commissioners. All of you who know anything of how much depends on management will realize how earnestly I trust that they may decide to retain the area, and may feel confident of finding representatives in the future to manage it for them on sound financial principles, and in the best interests of tenants and landlords. Those who know what a country landlord can do in a village will realize the influence of wise government in such an area. This land is church land, it adjoins the parish church, it is quite near the Talbot settlement, established by, and named after, the bishop of the diocese. Surely it should not pass from the control of the owners. If clauses in leases were as wisely planned and as strongly enforced as possible, they could still not be like the living government of wise owners. And since needs and standards are forever altering, many decisions involving change during the next 80 years may be desirable. Payment of rates by tenants. Letter of 1894. In all these new cottages I am introducing the plan of arranging that the tenants should pay their own rates, the rent being fixed much lower, to enable them to do this. The plan of making weekly tenants responsible for rates is very difficult to work, not being general. The machinery and arrangements do not help us. But I have felt it to be very important, as well as to be worth a great effort. It may be that some of those in authority will realize its value, and that we may get some help in time. What would conduce most to make the plan succeed would be that some allowance should be made for tenants paying their rates in advance, analogous to, though not naturally so great as, that made to landlords who compound. Also that by some means the various payments might be spread over the year, falling due at different quarters. This would go far to mitigate the difficulty for working people of paying a lump sum down twice a year, as is demanded in some London parishes. Weekly or fortnightly collection, which I hear is arranged for in Edinburgh, would manifestly be more costly, but our tenants would manage a quarterly payment pretty easily. However, at present there is no hope of any modification of existing arrangements, and we must do our best to fit in with the present regulations in the several parishes. I hope that, if we lead the van, others will follow, and cooperation may come in time from officials. All newly elected vestrymen might, meantime, do well to try to secure that fuller facts should be inserted on claims and receipts. The words made, due and payable are used in a way not always clear to the ratepayer, while the option of paying in separate installments is often not shown clearly on the claims. This subject, however, is somewhat technical, and I only refer to it here because it is interesting me deeply. I think it would tend towards municipal economy, likely to tell to the advantage of the time to come. Gardens in London. Letter of 1875. When I look at the unused bits of ground around a farm or cottage, I sometimes think what they would be worth at the back of a London house. But even in the front of their houses in a London court, are the poor much better off? I go sometimes on a hot summer evening into a narrow court, with houses on each side. The sun has heated them all day, until it has driven nearly every inmate out of doors. Those who are not at the public house are standing or sitting on their doorsteps, quarrelsome, hot, dirty. The children are crawling or sitting on the hard, hot stones, till every corner of the place looks alive. Everyone looks in everyone else's way, the place echoes with words not of the gentlest. Sometimes on such a hot summer's evening, in such a court, when I am trying to calm excited women shouting their execrable language at one another, I have looked up suddenly and seen one of those bright gleams of light the summer sun sends out just before he sets, catching the top of a red chimney-pot, and beautiful there, though too directly above their heads for the crowd below to notice it much. But to me it brings sad thought of the fair and quiet places far away, where it is falling softly on tree and hill and cloud, and I feel that quiet, that beauty, that space would be more powerful to calm the wild excess about me than all my frantic striving with it. Leicester Square shows us another thing. Such places must be made bright, pretty and neat. A small place, which is not so becomes painfully dreary. It is quite curious to notice how little one feels shut in when the barriers are lovely, or contain beautiful things which the eye can rest on. The small enclosed leads which too often bound the view of a back dining room in London oppress one like the walls of a prison, but a tiny cloistered court of the same size will give a sense of repose, and colour introduced into such spaces will give them such beauty, as will prevent one from fretting against the boundaries. Strange and beautiful instance this of how, if we recognize the limitations appointed for us, accept them, and deal well with what is given, the passionate longing for more is taken away, and a great peace hallows all. The Workers. Letter of 1900. I have been thinking a great deal about how responsible bodies can, in the future, secure such management by trained ladies, as has been found helpful in the past. This has turned my attention much more than heretofore to the thought of how to provide more responsible professional workers, for I feel that, however much volunteers may help, it is only to professional workers that responsible and continuous duties can, as a rule, be entrusted, especially by large owners or corporations. Up to now my professional workers have been among my most zealous and selfless colleagues, always ready to take onerous duties, to fill vacant places, to slip out of the way and go to new fields when it seemed best, always ready to help to train others for management in houses, whether in London, the provincial towns, Scotland, Ireland, America, Holland, or any other place from which work came, taking their holidays, when best they could be spared, and in every way proving themselves true helpers by their hearty recognition that what we had to do was to teach, initiate and supplement as many earnest workers as we could. What I owe to them in the past for the devoted help they have thus rendered for now many years, no one will ever know. But hitherto I or some tried and experienced volunteer have been the responsible person to whom private owners, or men of business, or corporations, have entrusted their houses, and it is we who have reported upon all business. As a matter of fact, as you all know, we have put all management on a business footing, and with few exceptions have charged the owners the ordinary 5%, on rental usually paid to collectors. Thinking over all this with regard to the further future, and to the larger areas that we can cover, it seemed to me that the present plan had its limitations. Even if many more such leaders were found, how would they be known? Could responsible bodies make plans dependent on them? Then I realized that my best plan for the future would be not only to train such volunteers as offered and the professional workers whom we required, but to train more professional workers than we ourselves can use, and as occasion offers, to introduce them to owners wishing to retain small tenements in their own hands and to be represented in them by a kind of manager not hitherto existing. The ordinary collector is not a man of education, with time to spare, nor does he estimate that his duties comprise much beyond a call at the doors for rent brought down to him, and a certain supervision of repairs that are asked for. If there existed a body of ladies trained to more thorough work, qualified to supervise more minutely, likely to enter into such details as bear on the comfort of home life, they might be entrusted by owners with house property. We all can remember how the training of nurses and of teachers has raised the standard of work required in both professions. The same change might be hoped for in the character of the management of dwellings let to the poor. Whether or no volunteers cooperated with them would settle itself. At any rate, owners could have, as I have told them they should have, besides their lawyer to advise them as to law, their architect as to large questions of buildings, their auditor to supervise their accounts, also a representative to see to their people and to those details of repair and management on which the conduct of courts or blocks inhabited by working people depends. Where people live close together, share yards, wash houses and staircases, too often there is no one whose business it is to supervise and govern the use of what is used in common, or to see how one tenant's conduct affects others. The work. Letter of 1879. I should like, in my letter this year, to note down what it appears to me you are all feeling as to the difference between the charge of a court where the people are your tenants, and much other visiting among the poor. The care of tenants calls out a sense of duty founded on relationship, the work is permanent, and the definite character of much of it makes its progress marked. Have you ever asked yourselves why you have chosen the charge of courts, with all its difficulties and ties? The burthen of the problems before you has been heavy, and the regularity of the occupation has often demanded of you great sacrifices. Why have you not chosen transitory connection with hundreds of receivers of soup, or pleasant intercourse with little Sunday scholars, or visiting among the aged and bedridden, who were sure to greet you with a smile when you went to them, and had no right to say a word of reproach to you about your long absences in the country? Why did you not take up district visiting, where, if any family did not welcome you, you could just stay away? Because you preferred a work where duty was continuous and distinct and where it was mutual. Because, also, the petty annoyances brought before you at such awkward moments, with so little discretion or good temper, the smoky chimneys, broken water pipes, tiresome neighbors, drunken husbands, as well as the great sorrows caused by death, disease, poverty, sin, have called not only for your sympathy but for your action. From the greatest to the least, the problems have implied some duty on your part. You have each had to ask yourself, what ought I, in my relation to the tenants, to do for them in this difficulty? From the merest trifle of a cupboard key broken in the lock to the future of some family desolated by death, or sunk in misery through drink, all has asked your sympathy, much has demanded your action. I have said the charge of tenants has been valued by you also because the duty is mutual. It implies your determination, not simply to do kindnesses with liberal hand, popular as that would be, but to meet the poor on grounds where they too have duties to you. Spirit of the work. Letter of 1890. I will not in this, which is my one letter of the year to you, my friends and fellow workers, enter on the great public questions, which are attracting an ever-increasing degree of interest. Whatever be done about free meals, free education, why do we call them free, instead of paid for by charity, by rates, or by tax, do you think? Whatever may happen about strikes or immigration from the country, for you and me there remain much the same great eternal duties, love, thought, justice, liberality, simplicity, hope, industry, forever. Still human heart depends on human heart for sympathy, and still the old duties of neighborliness continue. Let us see that we fulfill them, each in our own circle, large or small. Perhaps we may find the fulfillment of them answer more social problems than we quite expected. Perhaps we may find changes of system effect little reform unless courageous and honest men carry them out with single-mindedness and thought for others. If the free meal, free education, subsidized house accommodation attract you, will you pause and remember, first, that they are by no means free, but cost someone, somehow, just as much, probably a great deal more, than if provided otherhow? The question, if you get rid of the word free, which is deceptive, clears up a little, and becomes, is this the best way of, first, providing, and second, paying for these necessities? And then, having answered this for yourself, see to it that you are wholly single-minded if you advocate this sort of subsidy for the poor. Be sure you do so neither from cowardice nor from ambition. If, indeed, it be pity, genuine kindness and a sense of justice that moves you, then the feeling is so good that in some way I believe it will lead you right. Besides, you will keep your power to watch and see and alter as you come face to face with facts, and may modify all systems, and keep the desire to do justice and help in whatever way is seen finally to be really helpful. But if you let one touch of terror dim your sight and flinch before the most terrible upheaval of rampant force or threat, if, for popular favor, or seat at board, or success on platform, you hesitate to speak what you know to be true, then shall your cowardice and your ambition be indeed answerable for consequences which you little dream of. They may come now, or they may come later, but come they will, for only truth abides and will stand the test of time. Let us see that we hold her very fast, only those who are loyal to her can. 7 Women Managers, A Crown Estate, 2. Reprinted from Housing, the official journal of the Ministry of Health, September 27, 1919, by kind permission of the Controller, HM Stationery Office. A scheme of reconstruction, which should be of interest to local authorities, about to exercise the new powers conferred upon them by the Housing Act, has been undertaken by the Office of Woods on a London estate near Regent's Park, belonging to the Crown. The area in question lies to the east of Albany Street. It forms part of an estate, known as the Marylebone Farm, which about 100 years ago was leased by the Office of Woods principally for residential purposes, ample provision being made in the type of building for all classes. The estate includes the Cumberland Basin, connected with the Regent's Canal, Cumberland Market, an ancient market for the sale of hay and straw, and 2 other open spaces. The market is now seldom used, but it is still paved with setts and furnished with a weighing house. The other 2 spaces are squares, laid out with trees and shrubs, and are managed by the London County Council. During the last year or 2 many of the leases of property of the tenement class have fallen in, and others, which are not yet quite due, have been surrendered by the owners in preference to putting the houses into repair. With the gradual falling in of the leases, the Office of Woods were faced with the question whether the site was again to be let on lease, or whether it was to be held and managed on behalf of the Crown. The latter course was happily decided upon, and it was resolved to place the property immediately under the care of Miss Jeffrey, an experienced house property manager, trained under Miss Octavia Hill's system, who has under her a staff of trained women. The plan of reconstruction, which includes rebuilding most of the houses and altering the course of some of the streets, is being prepared by the Office of Woods. It is intended to convert Cumberland Market into a public garden and to form 1 or more children's playgrounds in addition. Rebuilding is hardly to be thought of for the moment. The immediate need is to make the existing houses reasonably fit for habitation. Most of them are dilapidated and some of them are filthy. Backyards have been built over, and in some instances another cottage has been put up, the only entrance to which is through the house which faces the street. The property has been for the most part badly neglected during the later years of the leases, while in the earlier years little care was exercised to see that the conditions of the lease were not departed from. Miss Jeffrey has opened a small office on the estate, as a centre from which the rents of the houses are collected week by week. On their visits the women managers find out what repairs are needed to make the houses habitable and clean, and supervise the repairs already in hand. Miss Jeffrey and her assistants are thus in constant touch with the tenants, helping them in many ways and inducing them to do their part in improving their surroundings. While insisting that necessary alterations and cleansing must be carried out forthwith, the managers do their best to study the comfort and convenience of the tenants as far as possible. If the tenants must be removed for a time, temporary accommodation is found for them. It is intended that the number of licensed houses on the estate shall be reduced as the leases fall in, and the managers are taking steps to ensure improved management, on public house trust lines, of those that will remain. About 170 families, representing a population of nearly 1,000, are already paying their rent to the women managers, and fresh houses come in every few weeks. The managers, with the Office of Woods behind them, believe that the work of reconstructing the estate can be successfully accomplished only if they can ensure the goodwill and cooperation of the present tenants. With this end in view, they called a meeting of the tenants already on their rent roll in March last, and suggested the formation of a tenants' association. The intentions of the Office of Woods with regard to the estate were explained to the meeting, as well as the reasons for desiring the tenants themselves to combine and cooperate in carrying out the scheme. The association has been formed, a chairman elected, and several other meetings have since been held. The scope of the scheme has been further explained, and points arising in the management, such as whether rates should be paid direct to the local authority or with the rent, have been discussed. That the powers and responsibilities of a tenants' association are beginning to be realized is shown by the fact that within the last few days a petition has been put forward by the association, asking that one of the first buildings to be put up on the estate may be a building containing rooms in which working men's clubs may be held. At present these clubs, several of which have a large number of members, are held in the public houses because there is no other place for them. The scheme bids fair to be a success. The necessary changes will be carried through with the least possible disturbance and friction among the tenants, because the women managers have already won the confidence of a large number of them. Many tenants do not want to part with their old cottages, dirty and dilapidated as they are, and others are afraid that, when the new houses are built, they will not be the persons to get them. The women managers, being on the spot, will get to know the individual needs of each household, and they will use every effort to meet the needs of these households when the houses are rebuilt. In the meantime, they are in a position to persuade the tenants gradually to adopt higher standards of cleanliness and comfort, and so enable them to take care of the new houses when they get them. Local authorities who are about to take over slum areas and reconstruct them may find it of advantage to follow the example of the Office of Woods and Place and Area, as soon as it comes into their hands, under the management of women educated and trained for this work. EAC 8 Management of Municipal Houses in Amsterdam, 3-3. Reprinted from Housing, the official journal of the Ministry of Health, July 19, 1920, by kind permission of the Controller, HM Stationery Office. The municipality of Amsterdam has provided, either directly or through public utility societies, a large number of dwellings for its working-class inhabitants. Up to the present time 4,000 families have been housed in these municipal dwellings, 6,000 more dwellings are in course of erection, and plans are laid for bringing the total number up to 20,000 at no very distant date. The housing policy of Amsterdam is comprehensive. The town has assumed the duty not only of supplying houses to meet the general shortage, but of providing houses for those for whom no one else is able or willing to find accommodation, and especially for large families. It does not, like most English local authorities, select its tenants, but accepts all, even the worst class, if they are houseless citizens of Amsterdam. In these circumstances the question of managing the municipal houses becomes a very important one. Mr. Kepler, who has presided over the housing department of Amsterdam for 5 years, came over to England to see for himself the methods of managing working-class property introduced by Miss Octavia Hill, and it was decided, as a result of his experience, to appoint women managers to take charge of the municipal houses and their tenants on the same lines. The first 2 women appointed had been trained years earlier under Miss Hill in London. There is now a staff of 13 managers working under the chief woman manager. It is the duty of the chief manager to receive applications from and to interview would-be tenants, to inquire into their circumstances, and to allot new or empty houses to those families whose need she considers most acute. Great care is taken in assigning the new dwellings. Some groups of houses are designed expressly for families with 5 or more children and are reserved for them, while families with a member suffering from tuberculosis are placed in dwellings which have a sunny balcony or garden. The managers collect the rents from the tenants in their homes. They take a note of any repairs needed and inform the repairs department. They instruct the women in the use of fittings and apparatus. All the municipal houses are fitted with gas cookers and electric light, and insist upon the tenancy regulations being observed. They cooperate with a number of voluntary societies, which help the tenants in various ways. The majority of tenants are of an average working-class type, and each manager looks after some 200 to 300 families. But since no tenants are rejected for reasons of character, it follows that there are among them families which are below the average and a few which can be described only as bad, they do not pay their rent promptly, they are destructive, or they are noisy, drunken and quarrelsome. When families are considered by the managers to belong to this group, they are removed into one of the special areas set apart for them. They are placed in temporary wooden one-story buildings, built in pairs with a fair amount of space between. These special areas are in open situations on the outskirts of the town. Here the families are under strict supervision, a supervision, however, which has always in view the education and improvement of the tenant. The manager, who has charge of one of these areas, on each of which are not more than 25 families, resides on the spot, in a dwelling similar to those occupied by the tenants. She reports weekly to the chief manager on the circumstances and conduct of each family and does all in her power to help and improve them. The salary of the chief woman manager rises from £350 to £550 a year. Her assistants are placed in 3 groups, according to experience and to the responsible nature of their duties. The salary of an apprentice during her year's training is £83. At the end of the year, if found satisfactory, she receives £125, rising to £183. After this she may rise gradually to £291. During the first 12 months an apprentice must attend an evening course of training at the University School of Social Work in Amsterdam, where she receives instruction in various branches of social work, such as the relief of distress, social hygiene, club management, housing and town planning. The Director of Housing regards the work of the women managers as extremely valuable from a social point of view, and he hopes to be able to find competent women to take charge of all the houses which the municipality are putting up. The salaries of the women managers are a fairly heavy charge upon the revenue, but the municipality considers the money well spent. They find that the tenants gradually improve, that rents are paid promptly and that the property is kept in good order, while good tenants appreciate the consideration shown to them and the interest taken in their welfare. EAC 9 Report on House Property Management in October 1920. The Women's Section of the Garden Cities and Town Planning Association appointed a subcommittee to report on the methods and practice of house property management, especially with regard to what is generally called working-class property and management by women. Having collected evidence from the personal observations of their own members and the written statements of other investigators, and having taken evidence also from a leading woman sanitary inspector and from the first municipal woman housing officer, the subcommittee adopted the following principle for general recommendation and as a basis of their report: that the management of working-class property should be in the hands of persons who have had definite training in estate management and in social science. The points considered and reported on are divided under 4 heads. 1. The classes of property to be managed. 2. The qualifications of manager and assistants. 3. The training necessary. 4. Payment. Introductory classification of management. The subcommittee desire to point out that until the advent of the woman house property manager, there is no evidence that any special form of management was considered necessary for the poorer classes of house property. A very general impression has been prevalent that the management suitable for better class property, that is, roughly, property let under agreement in quarterly and yearly tenancies, was also suited to tenement and small house property let out in weekly tenancies. In fact, no other system of management existed until Miss Octavia Hill took up the management of weekly tenancies and inaugurated a system of her own. When well-built properties are in occupation of selected tenants whose financial and social circumstances ensure that the property will be maintained, with few exceptions, in good condition, the work of management is reduced to a minimum and is chiefly occupied with rent collecting and simple and regular requirements in the way of upkeep and repairs. The assumption in the past that nothing more ought to be needed for property of lower grades has too often led to concentration on the more difficult collection of rents, with a minimum attention to repairs. No attention has been paid to economic and social conditions, and the net result has been the production of the slum. The subcommittee believe that the introduction of a suitable form of management, insisted on by some recognized authority, could have prevented the creation of slums in the past. They further believe that it may do so in the future, and that it can, with special effort, eradicate much that is evil in present bad areas. Miss Octavia Hill's system put into practice the theory that slums could be eradicated and advanced the proposition that management could be made a means to this end. She, the first woman house property manager, and workers she trained, all of them also women, introduced social economics into the business of house property management. The subcommittee feels strongly that many social evils might be avoided by the adoption of social economics into business generally. The distinctive mark of Miss Hill's system is the consideration of the personal, human factor as an integral part of the business. The subcommittee can find no justification for condemning this principle as unbusinesslike. The subcommittee have considered the work done by Miss Hill and those who have succeeded her, by visits, and they have read reports of the work in various cities and towns in England and Scotland, in Holland to see Women's Local Government News, February and March 1921. And in America, see Good Housing That Pays. They find there is evidence of many slum areas redeemed. Improvements by rebuilding have almost necessarily accompanied the work in nearly every case, but there are striking instances of the maintenance of the original old property in excellent sanitary condition. On the other hand, evidences of new properties falling into disrepair for lack of management are not wanting. 2. Managers. On all working-class estates, whether of higher or lower grade, there is much evidence to show that managers should be in complete control, attending to all matters connected with the property, including the collection of rents and repairs. There is evidence that the separation of responsibility for rent collecting and for ordering and superintending repairs leads to delay in repairs, and in some cases, has acted adversely on the rent collecting. Rent collectors who are not responsible for repairs are apt to forget to report the need of them. Whether the manager should be a man or a woman is not, in the opinion of the subcommittee, so important as that the principle of management inaugurated by Miss Hill should be adopted. At the same time, they are agreed that it should not be overlooked: 1. That the housekeeper is always a woman; 2. That the woman usually pays the rent; 3. That housekeeping and repairs are closely connected; and 4. That, therefore, a woman will usually be better equipped than a man to deal with the problems arising out of the management of working-class property. Whether a man or woman, the committee are of opinion that the manager should be properly trained under managers of accepted standing, should thoroughly understand the finance and law involved, should be of recognized efficiency for superintending repairs and upkeep, and should be well versed in the social problems of the day and the methods of dealing with them. A word should be added on personality. The more social and industrial difficulties are represented on an estate, the greater will the prominence of the personal element be. Whatever the class of property, the personal qualifications of the manager are of importance. Tact and consideration are always necessary. But the successful redemption of a slum area will demand specially strong personal qualifications, with wide sympathies and broad outlook. And just as some learned people never make good teachers, so some human temperaments will never produce good managers, however much trained. The subcommittee feel that, on the whole, the splitting of the management under separate departments is inadvisable. Where such division has succeeded in the past, it has done so largely because a former, pre-war, selection of tenants has kept the most difficult problems of management away from it. In bad areas it is most important that there should be one head in as direct contact with the estate as possible, responsible for upkeep and repairs, as well as rent collecting and selection of tenants. 3. Training. Now that housing has taken a foremost place among the questions of national importance, it is recognized that the standard of good housing cannot be attained unless accompanied by skilled management. From 1864, when Miss Hill began her work, house property may be said to have been managed on the two systems already indicated. The one, the more general, followed by men qualified by the examinations held for surveyors and estate agents. The other followed by women qualified by a high standard of education, and by special training in social economics. The training of the men has been thorough on technical, financial and legal lines, if too stereotyped and narrow in outlook. The training of the women has not been thorough enough on the technical side, and has therefore, perhaps, overemphasized the social side. In the opinion of the subcommittee, an attempt should be made to combine the two courses. New houses, tenanted as they are mostly by the better class of tenants, may be easily managed, but where tenants dispossessed from old houses are provided for in modern dwellings, the need is evident for a highly trained manager, who will add to his or her business and technical knowledge and educated interest in social conditions and problems. A point in favor of women's management comes in here. Many of the incoming housekeepers have had no experience in using new fittings. There have been cases in which the tenants have been unable, through lack of knowledge, to clean their porcelain surfaced or painted bath, or their earthenware sink, and have been quite at a loss in the matter of their close-ranged flues. Where women managers have been at work, instruction has been given and quick deterioration of appliances avoided. In many towns the congestion and overcrowding has been so great that it has been difficult even for families with regular incomes and a tradition of good housekeeping and homemaking to maintain their standard. Where unemployment has made the income uncertain, there has certainly been a lowering of the standard. When such families go into the new houses, they need the help of a skilled and tactful advisor if they are to become once more makers of happy and comfortable homes. It must be remembered that the past has left to the towns of today a heritage of slums which collect the products of all our social errors and are a breeding ground for every known social evil. Even as the worst forms of disease require the skill of the cleverest physician, so such properties call for the most highly trained management. From the examples the committee have had before them, they find that such properties have only been successfully dealt with under the Octavia Hill system, and so far only by women. The London University now grants a degree in estate management, and a College of Estate Management will shortly be opened in London, which will prepare for this degree. The subcommittee have examined the course laid down for the degree and recommend that steps be taken to obtain some recognition of the special need for the management of working-class property in its provisions. The college will be open to women as well as to men, and it would be well if some alternative or special section of the course could be arranged to meet this need. The lines along which training should develop have already been indicated under managers' qualifications. These might easily be arranged in the future at the college and on estates approved by the college or other authority, if the goodwill of that authority can be obtained. The best course of training would probably be one which combined the kind of studies arranged at the Household Science Department at King's College, the London School of Economics, and the College of Estate Management. All these institutions are linked up to the University of London, and they would doubtless be willing to cooperate in this matter. 4. Payment. Estate agents are usually paid on commission, but housing managers, superintendents, etc., under big corporations are paid salaries. The subcommittee do not consider the percentage system a good one, especially for lower-grade property, which needs the more time and skill. Also, where rent varies with the rates, as it does on nearly all the properties managed by women, the basis of variation is undesirable for such payment. Women managers, mostly paid on percentage, have hitherto undertaken the work at a sacrifice. Introducing as they did a new system of management, their work was intensified, but their percentage remained the same as that of the former agents. The subcommittee believed that better pay might be secured by the following methods. 1. By a wider and more general attempt at organization. One manager, responsible for the general principle of the management, could control a large property or groups of properties, with specially appointed superintendents and staff who have been made to understand the spirit and aims of the work. 2. By a careful combination of higher-grade quarterly tenancies with the lower-grade weekly, possibly aided by the promotion of some regular weekly tenancies to monthly payments. There is very little doubt that management of lower-grade properties has been made to pay by undesirable means. Key money, percentage fees on builders' bills and other payments have crept in some cases are openly acknowledged and expected. Management should be placed beyond the reach of such practices. Inefficient management is very largely responsible for the slums of today, and has led to the need for slum clearances, and the consequent enormous expense to the community. The necessary effort to redeem slum areas now can only be successful by management on modern lines, a strong, efficient business equipment, based on definite ideals with definite social aims. Work on such a foundation cannot fail to bring results, but it should be adequately paid. The attempt to overcome the evils of our heritage of bad management by the introduction of efficient management in bad areas may seem, at first, comparatively costly. It will never be quite so costly in the end as inefficient management. General remarks. A consideration of the whole situation has led the subcommittee to the following conclusions. 1. While not advocating that all properties should be handed over to women to manage, they are convinced that there are special requirements on certain properties which, at the moment, urgently call for women's special experience. 2. It would be advisable for all local authorities to appoint women in their housing departments. Birmingham City Council has taken the first step by appointing a woman rent collector and supervisor of houses. 3. That every effort should be made to draw the attention of the local authorities to the importance of the need for an improved standard of management. Members Subcommittee. M. Jeffrey, Chairman. E. A. Charlesworth. D. Maynell. F. C. Prideaux. Members of the Association of M. Galton are Women House Property Managers. E. A. Browning, Secretary. Signed, Gertrude Emmett, Chairman Women's Section Garden Cities and Town Planning Association. Printed in Great Britain by Unwin Brothers, Limited, The Gresham Press, Woking and London. Transcribers' notes. Typos fixed, non-standard spelling and dialect retained. ****** End of the Project Gutenberg ebook House Property and its management. ****** Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works. So the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission, and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works, to protect the Project Gutenberg concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute, or use this work, to protect the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license available with this file, or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Electronic Works 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark or copyright agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg electronic work, and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation, or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing, or creating derivative works based on this work, or any other Project Gutenberg work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook, or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7, or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work, or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links, or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary, or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII, or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg website at www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII, or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg license, as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about Donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt, that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f. 1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe, and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate, or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty, or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund, if you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4. Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties, or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg work. And C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN, or Federal Tax Identification Number, is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84116, 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form, accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform, and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.